Good morning, Mr. Cory Richards.
Good morning. How are you?
I am well. I have waited so long for this podcast.
I know we've talked about it for a while.
Since inception of the book, let's admit
Right.
it.
Yeah. Let's admit it. It's been about 3 years in the making. I think a lot of times people are like, I'm writing a book, and everybody goes, yeah, sure, whatever. But no, and you know what I really appreciate is you've been consistent. You're like, you supported me through the process, and you've always been like, when are we going to do it? So many people fall off. So that's kudos to you.
Yeah, I never fall off. That's one thing you can say about me. I'm on for life. Okay, so first of all, for my viewers, meet Mr. Cory Richards. His book with all my post-its is called Color of Everything: A Journey to Quiet the Chaos Within. And it's a beautiful cover, by the way. I love it.
Thank you.
It's gorgeous. So let's go back. Cory, I had the honor of having Cory be my neighbor for a brief time.
Yeah, it was a moment. It was a year. I was there for a year,
It was 1
roughly.
year. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So I watched Cory write his book literally through a window. I want to say for every actor and human being listening, when I say you really don't know someone until you know them, you are the perfect case. I had
Yeah.
no idea who was living next to me. I heard little rumors. He's famous. He climbed a mountain. He's a photographer. I was like, who is this guy? He seems really cool. I like living
Oh,
next door to him. But until I plunged into your book, I really did not realize who I was living next to. And it kind of makes me sad. And for those people listening, I always tell my actors, get to know people, ask them questions. And now I get to ask your questions publicly, but I imagine we would have had some really good conversations if I had read the book then. I know you sent me a couple pages once, which was a great honor, but wow, Cory, you were of mythical proportions.
I don't know
Mythical.
about that.
No, you really
Um,
are. And I'm not saying this just to boost your ego. I want to say that the life you have led is of mythical proportions. You are like all of us. You struggled, but you're
a lot.
share a lot, but you're sharing it publicly. You're so brave.
Mm, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think, what we have talked a lot about is like storytelling, because whether it's art, whether it's acting, writing, photography, music, whatever it is, art is that expression of story. And I think that's like our most base nature. And I think like literally everything we do is a story, right? We're just consummate storytellers. That's consciousness. That's what the brain does, is it creates stories. So in that way, I've always looked at it as like, well, if we have a story to tell, we should tell it, because it helps people connect. But the more honest you are with the story, the more people connect, because it's very easy, especially in this town, in Hollywood, whatever, the people create sort of there's a creation story that they craft, and so much of the actual, like the meatiness of it gets left out, because either they don't want that part to be seen, there's shame around it, there's embarrassment, or it's just easier to sort of follow the archetype of like, and then I did it, and that, then I did the thing, and it's so oversimplified, and we miss the juice of humanity when we do that. So yeah, I wanted to tell it in all of its rawness.
Okay, so you're speaking my language, humanity. As an acting teacher, that's all I want to get to is the core of humanity. But even still, we find places to hide. And so my
Hmm.
acting, the Strasberg technique is going in and finding those little hidden places. You clearly did not want to show all of it as you were going through your teen years.
Mm-mm.
You were showing it in different ways in terms of acting
Hmm.
out,
Hmm.
living
Yeah,
certain style of life, but to own it as an adult, what did that take?
I mean, it's so hard because it's such a good question. I've always had either a propensity to overshare, but or isolate, meaning, so like I would either give too much or completely withdraw. And Both of those are, I think, expressions of the same discomfort of overwhelming emotions inside. And I think for me, when this question comes up, and it always gets asked in slightly different ways, like how did you do it? What did it take? The truth is, it's just kind of it's practice, but it's more of a practice of internal honesty, if that makes any sense, where you're brave enough. We step into this space where we're brave enough to ask ourselves questions and then really answer them honestly, versus answering them in a way that protects our ego or protects our heart or protects the stories we've already told. Instead, there's and the funny thing about it is people are so afraid to do that, and yet you don't even have to share it with anybody. It's just about your own internal knowing. And the more we're at odds with that, and the more we're trying to tell ourselves stories that are not true, the more at war with ourselves we become. So I just noticed, look, I'm at war with myself. And um what's causing that? And then sort of the investigation of the stories and it takes time, and I still work on it. The willingness to answer the questions really honestly, even if the answer is something I don't like about myself. That's really what it took, and it's just practice. It's like, I mean, I work on it in my partnership with Jess, who who's a marvelous actor and who you've coached, right? And but we'll be in arguments or discussions sometimes, and I'll like ask myself internally, I'm like, is this true? Not like I'm telling her something not true, but like, is this reaction an honest expression of something, or am I creating this? And oftentimes I'm creating it. You know what I mean?
That you can tell that in the moment is so meta. Uh,
Yeah.
I can't I can't believe that. I wish we all could do that. Just stop and breathe and know what's coming out of your mouth before we
Yeah.
say it. Are you in alignment?
Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
Am I in integrity with myself right now? My
Eh,
deepest self?
yes, and if you were acting, you would just sit and let the line land, you know?
Right.
Wha eh
Exactly.
right? And sync up, as I say, to your emotional truth and what you're actually saying. It's the same thing. I was excited to have you on because we speak in similar languages. You are an artist through and through. That was the cold open. Now I want to
Yeah.
say, welcome to the show. This is Cory Richards. He climbed Mount Everest without oxygen. He's a photographer for National Geographic. He has a beautiful new book of photographs called Bipolar. Okay, so
Hmm.
just want to
There.
get that in. Here he
Yeah.
is. Of course, it's so typical that I would just dive in to your psyche. Uh, Corey, all those things I just said are phenomenal. You got to read the book and you have to go on the journey. I want to talk in the language of your book. You
Let's do
are
it.
a mountaineer. I heard you describe yourself
Yeah.
in an interview as a mountaineer. I love that. I've listened to your interviews. I've listened. I don't know if it seemed like a TED talk.
Yeah.
I've just I wanted to get you like live and get you from your book, and I have so many things that I want to talk about today. I've got pages, but I want to also read from the book.
Go for
Um,
I love that.
yeah. So there's a lot I want to read. Okay, so you're so human. You intersect art in what you do. You embody art. Um, of course, you climbed Mount Everest and you made it. Of course, you went through an avalanche prior to that and survived that. Beautiful photograph that was on the cover of National Geographic. Uh, First of all, are you still climbing? And are you climbing to what?
To what? Huh? I mean, I think I'm still climbing, but I'm not mountains currently. I have some interest in going back. I'm talking to one of the guys that I did several expeditions with, Adrian Ballinger. He's in the book. Um, I climbed Everest with him. We're talking about going back next year. There's definitely a piece of me that misses the mountains. One of the things that I've said, that it's so interesting doing podcasts, and Doing interviews, you start to find the language that you've been searching for,
Yeah, let's
because
use different language today. Let's break it
yeah,
up.
yeah, let's switch it up.
You've done
Let's
so many, and I knew that was gonna
yeah.
happen. I'm like, "Ah, I waited till the end. He's been on everyone's
No.
podcast."
No, no, no. I think it's what I'm saying is you learn how to articulate it more and more effectively, and the trick is staying authentic in that, so it's not rehearsed, right? But so bottom line is I'm not climbing anymore, not mountains anyway. I think I'm climbing towards different goals, but more climbing without trying to get to the top of something necessarily, just climbing to climb because it's beautiful as a metaphor and, kind of trying to just engage in the process. There's a lot of uncertainty right now in my life. So I don't really know. I don't know what I'm climbing to. I'm curious about that. I'm trying to live in that discomfort of curiosity, which in LA is very, very hard. It's hard to just let go, relax, surrender,
Mhm.
and just allow yourself to be uncertain because I think this city and this industry it sells us a vision of what we're supposed to do and what we're supposed to look like and what it's supposed to be.
Oh, 100%.
And we think that busyness is somehow success. And I
And
just see
it's
that and I'm
not.
like, it's not. Being busy isn't success at all.
Yeah, I got
So
that from your book signing too, when you would talk about just taking quiet time, that having a cup of coffee was a success to you.
yeah. Yeah.
That was really interesting to hear you say that. You talk about Hollywood. Of course, you're in Hollywood now. You have a
Yeah.
book. You have
Right.
books.
Right.
You're a public speaker. So, like, what's happening with that? Is there a movie in the works? Is a TV series? Oh,
You know,
You're here for a reason, of course, Jess. But you're here for a reason, right?
yeah, well, I just always knew that people, I think we throw around this word, excuse me, this word manifestation a little too flippantly these days. I do believe in manifestation. I think it works a little differently than people think, but I will say this, I always knew, and so you could say in some ways that it was manifested. I always knew I would probably end up splitting time between LA and someplace else. And because I've always been curious about film. I've always been curious about Hollywood. I've always been curious about um, translating some of my experience as a photographer and certainly now as a writer into onto the screen. I don't know. Again, I don't know what that journey looks like. I don't know at what point I'm on in that journey. Of course, the book is being shopped as a film or as a limited series. Um,
Of course.
and of course, but like who knows, right? That this town is it's a lot of talk and not a lot of ink.
But
And so
everyone needs a good story. We're hungry.
right, because how many Spider-Mans can we make, right?
Right. Yes.
Like and it's so there's yeah, we're talking about it. We're talking about
Who's gonna
what
play
that would look
you?
like. I would be I get asked that quite a bit and it's funny because I don't have there's people that have the emotional capacity to do it, but also you're looking at like you'd probably have to have three different versions of me,
Oh,
like adolescent Corey and adult Corey and maybe even little child Corey.
for sure.
Um
Yeah.
but there's people that I kind of have my eye on that I think are really talented that, I'd love to have a conversation with, but,
Mm. Yeah, you'd
we'll
have to go
see.
real deep. They'd wanna do some deep preparation.
Right.
You're a complex human being, which I love. That's so interesting to me. Alright, so I'm gonna climb, look, I'm using your words.
I
I'm gonna
love it.
climb to my questions. Okay, so everything we're going to talk about, I know a lot of actors are listening and I know we can relate. We live in the world of feelings, processing, all our own stuff comes up. So everything we talk about, feel I know you feel comfortable because you say it out loud, but
Totally.
I'm gonna give myself permission to talk about these things. I am not a psychologist, but what I'm getting from the book, um, and I do have some page numbers, and if you have your book, follow along. Okay.
I love
So
it.
I hope you all have this book because I'm going to promote this so you could get it ahead of time. But
Mm,
I love this. On page 37. Okay, I'm going to read this because I think it's gorgeous, but I'm gonna take a couple I'm gonna go out I'm gonna jump around. Above all, I love my visual arts course. Here I shine. These hours narrow my focus, and my mind is no longer fragmented, but singular. Art is a gift that never stops giving. It's unwanting, even though it commands attention. And it's one of two things that I know to be truly altruistic.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love that. I love that. So, you name 4 things, and I'll let you pontificate on that one. You name 4 things that are really important to me, and you say, "These are the things that are able to quiet my mind."
Mhm.
Nature, I count 5, so forgive me if I'm wrong.
No, no.
Nature, art,
Mhm.
sex,
Mhm.
photography, and
Mhm.
climbing mountains.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so like nature and climbing mountains, they're sort of like the same. Art, photography, the same, right? But they're like, but yes, I had never actually counted. I'm so happy you did. Because I was like, I hope she doesn't ask me to name them. Because I was like, well, I know there's nature, art, and sex, right? And so when
Well,
you
you
said
kind of
five,
build it up in your book, and that you're like, "And
yeah.
then I discovered this."
e- e-
We the and to back up a little, we're talking about PTSD,
mhm,
trauma, early trauma that you experienced, which
mhm.
leads to the racing of the mind and thoughts. Is that correct?
Correct. I mean, look, all of us are going to be born with some level of thought, like the speed with which we process information, but certainly trauma and specific circumstances in life, specifically early childhood development, influence the way our brains function. And so it's Judith Herman, who's a Harvard psychologist who studied trauma, that basically says, look, all psychological dysfunction, like I don't want to say all neurodivergence because that wouldn't be quite right. But when we talk about mental health complications, what she's saying is the vast majority, you could almost say all of it is really, they're all expressions of one thing, which is complex post traumatic stress. And where we pick those traumas up is as varied as the number of people living, right? Because we all live different lives. What's similar is how that uh, traumatic stress manifests in the mind. And that can be in a number of different ways. For me, that's sort of ADHD and I have a bipolar 2 diagnosis. And one of the things that happens with bipolar is you have these racing thoughts, incredibly fast thoughts. Part of that is, for me, the way I understand it is the ability to jump from thing to thing to thing to thing was a coping mechanism that allowed me to distract from the inherent stress of childhood. Uh, being in a stressful environment. This is not to say that, if you I mean, we all do that to some degree, but if you're in a stressful environment and you can't anticipate what's gonna come next, and you don't know what's happening, and you don't necessarily feel always protected from it, a very powerful coping mechanism is to be able to distract, 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 distract. So by virtue of that, my brain has developed very, very fast. Or very to have very, very quick thoughts, and that, like I said, is tied to bipolar 2 as well. And so finding things that narrowed that focus was essential because otherwise it's just you're just spinning, right?
Mm.
And so art could do this thing where like I literally the world just goes away. And it was just me and the thing that I was drawing or painting or I loved crafts. I loved making things with my hands. I was obsessed with like Native American art when I was younger and I'd like bead headdresses and stuff like that because it would just calm my brain. And then nature, I was raised skiing and climbing. I started skiing when I was 2 and climbing when I was 5. And in those places, specifically those activities, um, again, you don't have really time to be thinking about other things. So you're narrowing that focus. Photography, you're narrowing that focus, you're calming the mind. And then sex, um, both in beautiful and maladaptive ways became another way to do that. But like all of them, over time, you kind of need more and more and more and more and more to find the
Correct.
stasis. It's like any drug, right? And so that's when it becomes maladaptive, where no matter how much you do, you can't get back to that place of quiet. Because for me, I was trying to escape it. I was trying to quiet the chaos within through all these different mechanisms outside of myself, and it worked until it didn't.
Okay. I have a feeling a lot of us can relate to that.
Yeah, yeah, and then you don't have to be bipolar 2 or ADHD. Those are just
Yeah.
the that it's a very human experience. We want to I mean, look at our phones right now. We are
Mhm.
inundated with toxic stress all the
Right.
time.
Mhm.
The end of the world is coming. If this person gets elected, we're all fucked. If that person gets elected, we're all fucked. Like, if war, terror, climate change, all of it. And because of the 24-hour news cycle and these little devices, we are constantly inundated with stress and toxic stress. So we're living in a stress response. And then what do we do to distract ourselves? We look at our phones. It's the strangest. It's like this
I know.
reinforcing cycle of it reinforcing the stress, right? But that's what we're doing. That's why our attention spans are so gone, because we're literally trying to zone out to calm our nervous systems down. And yet we're going back to the source of the thing that's lighting them up to begin with.
Wow, thank you for saying that. I've never thought of it that way, and I know that phones are like the enemy of the actor in terms of concentration,
They're the
which
enemy of
is
concentration, period.
I in period. Yes, and we're all struggling with it. It is like a disease that we're all
Mhm,
struggling with, but I've never really put it that way, that we're traumatizing ourselves by going back.
mhm.
I
Yeah,
have to check the news every couple of hours, or I
right.
don't know what's going on in the world, and then that spirals me into depression.
And I wanna, like, point out too is that, like, we all do that, and it's okay, right? But at some point, it's worthy of ask. I found it, like, there again, we're sold a story that we need to be informed in these ways, or that in order to be a successful actor, you have to have Instagram or whatever it is. They're not true. Those stories just aren't true. You can be a wildly successful actor and not have any social media. You don't have to be that informed, because truly, and I'm not advocating for people to totally disengage. Of course, fulfilling your civic duty to like show up as a citizen and vote and things like
Mhm,
that. We need
mhm.
some of that information all on board. What we don't need is to be constantly scrolling our news feeds. You can't do anything about most of it. You just
Agree.
can't. So all you're doing is just stressing yourself out. That's it.
Mm. Good.
That's
Better
it.
to be on the mountain. When you go on the mountain, I noticed like you did a Snapchat, right?
Yeah,
Climbing Mount
right?
Everest.
Mhm.
Is it hard to do both at the same time? Talking about managing technology, that was for a purpose to share. But when you normally go on a climb, I imagine you have to take your phone because for security reasons.
Well, it's some yes, now, yes, but really when I was starting climbing, like, especially in the Himalaya, like, smartphones really they were just coming out, they were still new. What was the year the iPhone came out? Was it 2003, 2004, 2004?
Something
I don't
like that.
remember.
Yeah.
So they were still relatively new. And we did, I was very engaged in the early days of real-time storytelling through, and this is before, TikTok, Instagram, all of that. We were doing it by um, YouTube. We'd like go into the mountains and we'd cut these dispatches from our tents on the side of a mountain and put out these short videos. And then, of course, Instagram came out. And then in 2016, we used Snapchat to do a real time storytelling sort of chronicle of climbing Everest without oxygen. And they were really fun experiments. And in hindsight, of course, I'm really glad, I'm happy we did that. And I also look at it and I go, man, how much did I miss by trying to be in
Mhm.
real time, by trying to give other people the real time experience? Like, did I even have the experience? Because there's a as soon as our phone's up,
I know.
whether we are there's a wall between us and the world.
I
Even
agree.
if even if you're filming it or photographing it, there's a wall. You're not actually in the moment. You're in your phone.
I have a filmmaker friend, Henry Jaglom, that says that, you know, he hates missing the moments and not filming them. Like it almost didn't happen. But
Mhm.
it's all about memory. You talk about memory in your book.
Mhm.
Um, okay, I'm going to divert because there's a great section for my actors about sense memory.
Mm.
When you were in the
Yeah,
rehab,
lifeline.
Lifeline rehab, there's a great paragraph there, actors, where he's talking about these sense memories of smell and sounds that he'll never forget. And that was
Mhm.
really exciting for me because you acknowledge that and you're so vivid in your memory that the trauma didn't affect the way you have recall on your experiences.
Well, it affects different recall. Certainly, I have profound sort of spaciness that comes from almost more of the dissociative impacts of trauma. But there are other things that I have very specific memories around, and that can actually they can happen the same way. The memory loss for me is experienced more like almost in a spaciness where people will remind me of things that I I have no recollection of. I'm like, "What? What are
Oh,
you like?"
really?
Yeah, yeah, I like, people will be like, "Oh, you remember that?" And I'm looking at them like, I don't really remember you." And it's that can be a little jarring at times. So,
I bet.
but you bring up a really cool point is that, like, and this is I think this crosses all the like, all art. Paint what it feels like, not what I photograph what it feels like, and when I say feel, like, how many different senses act what it feels like, how many different senses can you bring in to your expression? How
Mm,
many senses can you implant in your memory if you're embodying a character? And
thank
Jess
you.
does this work all the time
Yeah, we're
where
doing this work together. It's
right.
very exciting.
So what does it smell like when you're creating a memory for a character? What did it smell like in the room? What
Exactly.
what odd sounds were you hearing? What was the quality of the light? Was there did it was it like there was a hazer on, what was did the light feel yellow and hot? Did it feel so that's what I'm getting at, and that's where for me writing came in some ways came very naturally because it wasn't just about what I was seeing, and I think so often, um, that's a pitfall of writers, but all artists is they make it about one sense. They make it about sight, or they
Mm,
make it just about sound, or they make it just
mhm.
but there's 5 senses,
Of
and
course.
so when you can get all 5 working together, even if you're just describing it or you're implanting that picture in your head, the depth to which you can either embody that character or bring people into a scene in a book, whatever it happens to be, you're going to be more effective at it the more senses you can engage.
You hear that? You hear that, everyone? I think you're gonna make a great actor once I get my hands on you. Okay. Uh, okay. You talk about your imagination. You go into these deep fantasy sequences of what
Mhm.
would happen, worst case scenarios. Those are
Always worst case.
so much fun. I mean, talk about your imagination. Okay, I want to talk about your brother a little bit. I
Mhm.
know, huge part of your life. Very hard to read those scenes. I think a lot of us grew up in homes where we had massive growing pains and people
Mhm.
acting out. I had trauma in my life. I lost a brother when I was 10, and
Mm.
whoa, there was a lot of reaction from me, and I
Mhm.
disturbed my household with my grief.
Mhm.
So this touched me a lot, and we all have it in our own way. Page 29. Okay. Whew. I've decided that to protest and defy is to be seen, and to be seen is to be loved.
Mhm.
And you continue on later on page 41. Conflict is a catalyst for attention.
Mhm.
So I wanted to talk about that because it's such a huge thing, not only in acting, but as human beings. We just all want to be seen. And what do we do to get that attention? And it can get really effed up what we do to get attention. We live in this world that is so all about being seen. And you as a young boy, that this is what you had to revert to. It's upsetting. And then so now I ask you, what how are you in relationship to this now?
You know, look, we all, everybody, it's normal to want to be recognized, to be seen because it makes us feel safe and it gives us a sense of security that because by being seen and recognized, that sort of ensures survival. So at a very base level, it's one of the most natural things in the world. Fame is not necessarily, I don't want to call it unnatural. It's just it is fame was not something we necessarily evolved to do. Um, we can handle it, but there's this, especially when a human, I'll speak for myself, because I had sort of a core belief that there was some level of a value deficit. Like, do I really matter? Like as a human, do I matter? Um, do I really deserve life at all? And that comes from the abuse, that comes from violence, that comes from not feeling protected, that comes from all sorts of things. By the way, I don't blame anybody for any of those things. So I hope when you read the book, people see
You
there's no
actually
blame
say
here.
that. Yeah, you actually say something like, "I co-authored it."
Oh yeah,
This
yeah.
this dynamic.
I did. I co-authored it, and for a long time, it was like this happened to me, and then I went. This is about that honesty. When you start to really get into it, go, did this just happen to me or was I playing an active role in it? And that's back to like the idea that conflict was a catalyst for attention, meaning that my brother learned that in order to get his emotional needs met, the he didn't feel like some of his emotional needs were getting met for a number of different reasons. And he learned that conflict, the first and foremost, pain wants to be recognized, it wants to be heard. And
Mhm,
so it comes out, and that's what acting out is. And then if the acting out creates conflict, you get attention, right? So now you're creating your pain is just trying to find a voice. Your discontent, your discomfort, the intolerable nature of whatever it is you're feeling inside is trying to make itself seen and heard. And for us, he learned that, well, if he picked on me, he got attention. It wasn't positive attention, but it was still attention,
mhm,
right? And I learned that if he kicked the shit out of me, I got attention. So in time, it became like that's why I say we co-author it. So I'm actually instigating at times the violence that's coming towards me because I end up as the victim in that role, right? And then I get attention. So it's this jockeying back and forth for attention, right? And I'm trying to get it and he's trying to get it. And then basically we learn that, well, if we get in fights, we're going to get attention that we need. And
mhm,
but this is where it gets sticky. I think, and this is where it translates potentially to Hollywood too. Attention is not love. And that's where, when we look at fame, you can
mhm,
never, these, a lot of these mega celebrities, they need more and more and more because they think that the attention is love. It's not love. It's not love. Even when people say, oh, fans love them, they don't love you. They love a picture of you. They love an idea of you. They don't love you.
mhm,
They love the way a character touched them, and then they form a bond in their mind, but that's not love. That's
mhm,
not love at all. Attention is not love. Attention can be an expression of love, but that's not what it is. And, so, yeah, the relationship with my brother became about that. Like, it was, you know, if I had a bloody nose, it meant that I was loved. That was what was going on in my head,
mhm,
you
mhm.
know? 'Cause then
Yeah,
my
that
parents are giving me that, I'm getting cared for in the ways that I want to be cared for. So it's like I'm trying to manufacture,
right.
love through attention.
But wouldn't "I love you, Corey, I cherish you as a son, you're doing the best you can," would that have sufficed at the moment?
Not entirely, no. I don't think that it's not as simple. But I do think what I really longed for was the sense of, um, being treated not as how would I say this? The adults that I had the most respect for were the ones that treated me as an equal.
Mm,
Even when I was small, like, when I was 7 years old, they talked to me like an adult. They got on my level. They did there was none of the sort of diminutive, uh, patronizing, condescending talk.
mm.
Even if they were giving me information or feedback about my behavior, they were speaking to me as an adult, and I would listen to them. But if it was a dynamic of control, then I would reject it. I would reject any authority, right? Any authority. And I actually think that, of course, of course, children need boundaries. Of course, there has to be a structure around that. I'm not saying that kids um, should live unboundaried in any way. What I'm saying is that it's the matter in which I was approached that was so problematic for me. And so to your question, what I wish is that more people in those moments of conflict spoke to me as an equal, as an adult, and were asking and would have asked about my honest input and feedback from a curiosity standpoint versus reactionary. Like a lot of times, I found. Sorry, this is a rambling answer because it's a really good
No, it's it's
question.
it's it's very good, and it also touches on other things in your book.
It's I found that when I was getting talked down to, or even in times people were like, "Well, tell me how you feel." And this is common, I think, even in relationships. I mean, again, Jess and I talk about all this stuff because it's all childhood wounding. But oftentimes people ask us how we feel only to tell us why that's not right.
Mhm.
And that is a strange thing, and we do it to each other all the time, especially when we're in conflict. "Well, tell me how you feel." And then the person tells you how they feel, and then we immediately go, "Well, this is why that's flawed." And that is not helpful because ultimately, I'm just if I do that in a relation if I do that with Jess, right? Like, she tells me how she feels. She takes this incredible step to be vulnerable and open up and be honest with me. And
Mhm.
then I immediately go, well, this is why logically that doesn't, and I'm just rejecting her emotions. And
And it
that's
does
the message.
yeah, or you're not safe to say them, and then maybe, yeah, next
Exactly.
time you don't want to.
So you
It
clam up.
so you clam up. There are 2 seeds that I see here, that now are expressed in your adulthood. One is living in your body, so the
Hmm.
fighting, the attention, so you go off and you become like you take the hardest physical challenge.
Hmm.
Everything's in your body. The other is that you don't want someone to tell you what to do, so what better than to go off alone on a mountain,
Right.
right? So
Yeah.
these characteristics, are developed into ways that you can then do it your way. Um, and I find your this independence in you, this struggle. That's the heroic struggle that we want
Hmm.
you to find peace.
Hmm.
That's
Yeah.
what we're rooting for in this book. Where is he going to find peace? Where is he going to be satiated?
Yeah. And it's age old wisdom. Somebody made a really astute observation. My friend Adam, and he was like, "Do you think he went and did all those big things in defiance to like being locked in a psychiatric unit when I'm 13 years old? Do you think the necessary reaction is to create such an unbound um, life, meaning you're locked in? So then, like we always talk about the pendulum swinging. Did it have to swing all the way into such an unbound life? And
Probably, right? Would you
I don't
say?
know, it's yeah, but it's a good inquisition, it's a good inquiry, right?
Right.
It's a beautiful curiosity. I can't answer that question, but, yeah, it's fascinating.
And one of the things that, I was is towards the end of my questions, but let's bring it up now is that you talk about how living on the edge, it was where you had to go. You had to live on the edge. You had to know you were alive. You had to feel things so strongly. I can relate to that. But at the same time, you talk about keeping the madness from clipping at my heels.
Yeah.
Uh, after all you've been through, and yes, you have to read the book, but after
Yeah.
all you've been through, how do you do that now? Do you still need to do that now? Has it changed? Has it mellowed with age? Or just the maddest still wanna tiptoe in and say like, "Hey, Corey."
Well, look, I think we all travel with a dark passenger, and I think so many of us spend our whole lives trying to bottle those darknesses, those dark impulses. And for me, the story that I picked up is, there's something wrong with you and you're going to go crazy. If you don't do these things, you're going to be an addict and you're going to go crazy. I was so scared of going crazy. Um, I was so scared of what that looked like. I was
Had
scared of,
anyone ever gone crazy in your family? Did you have any example of it? I mean, I know I read about your mom and her brother, and
yeah.
it was a one line there that really
Mhm.
was like, "Huh,
Yeah. I don't
huh."
go into that. And I wish I had gone more into that in the book actually.
Because I thought,
But
well, that affected his mom and how she parented him. I was like, where is there anything, did you have examples of trauma and yeah.
well, I think they're yes, but they were subtle, and I don't think I really started to unwind those until really much, much later in life, in the past 4 or 5 years. But, I think because my uncle did kill himself, when my mom was growing up, I think her she had such a deep fear around, uh, mental health as it relates to suicide, that there was an over attention and an oversensitivity
Mhm.
to, sort of like an inadvertent helicopter mom in a very strange way, right?
I get
Like my
that.
mom was not a helicopter mom in the way that she's like, "Okay, don't do that." She was like, "Go play, go fall out of trees." Like she was all about that. Go climb mountains. But then there was this sort of the helicoptery stuff was more emotional, to the point where it becomes somewhat stifling. And, and there's also this constant reinforcement of, something's wrong with me. Something's wrong with me. What I don't feel like, but it's the idea there being that something is always broken in me. And so I learned that, I could distract myself from all those fears by going and doing very dangerous things. And certainly there was a lovely piece to that. It was a beautiful piece that I could go and I could live on. And I encourage people to test their comfort zones and go stand on the edge of something and,
Mhm. I love that.
yeah, like identify what scares them and go stand right on the edge of it, touch it, dive in a little bit, see how it feels. That is so, so healthy. Also, you don't have to live there. You don't have to live in a constant, you know, exposure therapy state of life. And truthfully, for me, I kept thinking that the farther I went, the higher I went, the harder I went, the more success I had, whatever it happened to be. Eventually, I was going to just outrun the dark passenger altogether. And then I learned that I don't want to outrun the dark passenger. And in fact, the dark passenger is not about they don't want to doesn't want to hurt me. It's just part of me and it's part of being human. And the more I can listen to what that piece of me actually wants, not necessarily engage with it, but listen to it and then be curious about, well, why does it want that? Why does that piece of me want these maladaptive behaviors? What piece of me, what little piece of me is asking for those things? And then address that internally, you find that it's not so dark after all. It's just a maladaptive expression, again, of some pain or some emotion trying to be expressed. There's a beautiful Kay Tempest, I think. She does a spoken word poem called Hold Your Own. And I think she's Scottish. It is one of the most beautiful spoken word poems I've ever listened to, but there's a line in it, and I'm gonna butcher it, but she says, "Know the wolves that hunt you. In time, they will become the dogs that bring you your slippers."
Oh,
And, like,
oh.
even saying that brings tears to my eyes because it's so true. Know the wolves that hunt you. Turn and look at them and sit there and watch them approach and snarl, and they might even bite. but the more you give them attention in a healthy way, the more they become docile and they start rolling over and they start showing you their belly. And that's where all the information is. And then you have a fierce companion, a fierce protector that doesn't need to be aggressive. But you have to turn to them. You have to look into those eyes and you have to go, what piece of you needs this? What are you hunting? And usually it's not the conflict. The conflict is just a way for pain to be expressed.
Cory Richards, this is going to go down as one of my favorite podcasts ever.
Mm.
I have to respect your time. I will not get all my questions answered, but I will end with a quote of yours, which is from a live interview. Rather
Mm,
than bringing a mountain down to our level, we should try to rise up to the level of the mountain.
mhm,
That's Cory
yeah.
Richards, who rose up to the level of the mountain. Cory, please tell us your social media and where we can buy your book.
So, social media is just I'm really just on Instagram at Cory Richards, and it's Cory. The book, if you've got a local bookshop, please go buy the book there. But The Color of Everything, the memoir, which is out now, is available on Amazon. And Bipolar, which is the basically they are an ecosystem. Bipolar is the coffee table book of all the photographs and the art. Um, they are really the same book. They're two expressions of the same uh, story, and they work best together. So they're both available on Amazon. And here's my big ask: if you buy it from Amazon, please leave it a 5-star review. Those reviews help so much,
Oh.
because the world is an algorithm these days, and the higher the more well the book is reviewed, or the higher the book is reviewed or rated, the more it gets put in front of people, and the more it sells, and the more this story can get out and hopefully help other people,
And you've
because
only heard morsels of how
yeah.
much it's going to help us here. And already I think people are going to leave here feeling that. So imagine if there's a whole book of it, right?
Yeah, yeah. So that's where you can find it, and it's I really do hope, my hope is that people just, even though some of the stuff that is not really relatable in terms of like climbing Everest without oxygen, my hope is, and some of the feedback I've gotten is like somehow people like a Midwest mom is like, God, I feel so seen in this, which is a strange thing that, like
Mhm.
it's not about climbing mountains. That's just in there. But that's always the greatest compliment is when somebody goes, man, I've been thinking so much about my family and I feel so seen, and I they want to go give the world a hug. They want to give themselves, that's the point.
Mhm.
So
I love that. All right, let's both go out and give the world a big hug today. Cory,
let's do
thank
it.
you for your time, and I would love you to sign my book next time I see you.
Thank you for having me. It's been a
Mhm.
long time coming. We'll do another one.
Thank you so much, Cory Richards. You know, it takes courage to come onto a podcast and open your life up to total strangers, open your heart. And I know that Cory's doing it for all the right reasons. And if you identified with Cory today, you may want to read the book, or you definitely want to read the book because it goes into detail so much deeper, and our conversation already was so deep, so you can imagine. I love that you joined me for this podcast. If you'd like to hear more, my first 2 seasons are on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and of course, diaryofanactress.com if you'd like to read the original diaries. It's been a pleasure having you. Stay inspired. Until next time.